it's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Marilee Spears, RDH. She helps dentists break through the seven-figure mark. That's $1 million in case you're not clear. In their practice and double their income, all while reducing stress and making the whole process as fun as possible. Because she thinks it's bad business when dentists don't smile. She's been doing this for 25 years. Her dad's a dentist. How are you doing today, Marilee?
I am doing awesome. It's really, really great to connect with you, Dr. Farran.
Oh, call me Howard. But so your dad was a dentist and you became a hygienist. That is so damn cool. Was your dad the first dentist in the pedigree, or were there other ones before him?
My dad was the first dentist in the pedigree, and he definitely laid the foundation for our family. So I'm the 10th of 11 children.
10th of 11th?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
You have to be Catholic or Mormon?
Mormon. And what happened was my dad.
I'm always right on that, aren't I?
You're always right. You're always right.
A Presbyterian or a Lutheran.
But I will tell you this, Howard. My dad, I don't think he knew what he was in for. My mom wanted 12 kids. I think my dad would have been very happy with 2. So they compromised and they had 11.
That is awesome.
As husbands, you probably realize how that compromise works. So yeah, I was the 10th. I was like only the 7th or 8th unwanted child in the family, but we had a good group of us going along. And so my dad worked very, very hard in his practice. He had 11 children, right? And he was at his practice all the time. So growing up, I really believe my dad was at the practice all the time because he had 11 children at home. And I'm not going to say that there wasn't any piece of that. I'm sure that there was some piece of that. It was his peace and quiet. It was his bachelor pad. But in 2012, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia, and he very quickly went downhill and he passed away. And I realized you and I started speaking about this before we started the recording, that there is absolutely a spiritual part of why I do the work that I do. And that is just my dad's legacy and my dad's spirit. Because very quickly after he passed away, I realized that his perspective was different. And I realized that the take I had of him is that he was at the practice because he wanted an escape from the family or to be apart. It was very different. The fact is that he had to work so hard because he was working to provide for our family, and that if he could do it all again, he would do it very differently. And so I help those dentists that want to do it differently while they have the opportunity now. My dad unfortunately doesn't have the opportunity any longer, but a lot of us, we're still living and breathing. We have the opportunity to change our priorities, change our businesses, and live the lives we want to live now.
How old was he when he passed?
He was 77.
Oh, well, that's the average just lived 74.
Yeah,
so he beat half his homies.
No way, average was in dentistry? Are you kidding me? Because for whatever reason, I thought it was 78, so he did beat it.
Yeah, well, it's 74 for males and 79 for women.
Okay.
Men die about almost 5 years before women. 1, because they want to, and 2 is when you look at all the big killers, like 30,000 in car wrecks, that's more likely to be men. Look at their insurance rates. So the 30,000 suicides is a majority men, because women actually attempt suicide twice as much, but they always do it with like a butter knife on Facebook Live.
That's right. That's right. Or an overdose of ibuprofen or something like that.
And men always use a weapon.
Exactly.
So men's ratio of attempted to completed is very high. And then the 30,000 accidents, always your dad that falls off the garage or the tree or whatever. But but I'm sorry I lost your dad. I bet that was a rough year.
You know what? It was a rough couple of years. It was a rough couple of years because I was really working a lot in his practice during that time. When my dad gave my sister was the hygienist within his practice, and I lived about 2.5 hours away. I lived right outside of Seattle, Washington. My dad practiced south of Portland, Oregon. And so when my dad handed over the keys to my sister and I, to me, Howard, that was like a celebration because my dad lived at that practice. He lived and breathed dentistry. And so when he handed over the keys and said, I can't do it any longer, take care of the practice, take care of your mom, it was at that moment just such a relief that he realized he needed to take care of himself. And my sister and I, we were like, okay, we've got it. But what happened was, as soon as we went down to his office, it was a Saturday in September, we went down to the office and that relief was gone almost immediately because we saw where the numbers were at in the practice. We saw what was going on, and it was like a very dire situation. The practice itself was actually on the brink of bankruptcy. And so it was a really tough year for the next couple of years. And I can honestly say, through a series of nothing short of miracles, the practice was able to be turned around. We were able to transition it. And there's a fantastic practice who continues his legacy now.
Now, did you sell the practice to a dentist, or did you hire an associate, or what'd you do?
What we did is, at first we had a temporary dentist in. My dad also was a general dentist that also did orthodontics. And so we were able to eventually sell the private practice and then also bring in an orthodontist. and transition the ortho patients to an orthodontist. And so we weren't able to sell the ortho portion, but we were able to bring in an orthodontist, and then we were able to sell the GP part of the practice.
And then how long did it take your mom to bounce back?
Oh, I think she's still bouncing back, to be honest with you. And it's been 4 years. Isn't that incredible?
You know, she's still not bounced back?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's fantastic. If you met my mom, I'm just saying she still misses my dad, right?
Yeah.
She still misses, but about a year and a half into it, she realized that's when the practice things were just very solid at that point, and that's when I think she could feel like she was completely taken care of, and that of course put her mind at ease, just to know that she wasn't going to have to go back to work as a greeter at Walmart. Right? Like she was going to be okay. And so I think that it probably took her a solid year and a half to feel like she had solid footing. And a big portion of that was just finances. But, you know, one of my siblings, unfortunately, has passed away, but she has 10 children to still keep her very busy and over 30 grandchildren. So she stays busy and she's doing well.
So there's 11 kids and one already passed away?
Yeah. My sister, when she was 28 years old, passed away from cancer.
Ah, was it the same kind?
No, it wasn't the same kind. She had Hodgkin's disease, and she had it when she was 19 years old. In fact, that's one of my earliest memories is my sister being in like our formal living room and just being so incredibly frail and sick. Chemotherapy is never fun. Man, I'm telling you, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it was a beast. You know, it was terrible. So that was one of my first memories there's a 17-year age gap between my oldest sister and myself. And so when she was 19 years old, she had cancer. She had Hodgkin's disease. My dad had leukemia.
Wow. Yeah, there's 17 years between me and my little brother, too.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he was a Roman Catholic, birth control. What do they call it? The Vatican roulette. And you know what? It was weird. He was a total mistake, and he was just the life of the family. There was nothing. I mean, you know how happy a family you get when they get a new dog or a cat or a puppy.
Yes.
Well, a talking human blows doors on a puppy. And me, my 5 sisters, it was the coolest damn thing. And it was the best thing that ever could have happened.
Are you and your younger brother the only boys in the family?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
so I got
fantastic.
2 older sisters straight out of high school, went into the Catholic nunnery. Then I was going to be a priest until I met this blonde chick named Jane. And then the 3 younger sisters and me, they all got married and had kids and all that stuff. And then my little brother, Vatican roulette, family planning, whatever. So out of the 11 kids from a dentist, 2 became hygienists. Did anybody else go into dentistry or healthcare?
Yes, 2 hygienists. 1 is in hygiene school right now, and 2 dentists.
Oh my God.
The lower end of the family is very dental heavy. I think my dad realized as he was putting more and more kids through college that he realized, hey, I really want my kids to carry on in dentistry. So the second half of the family is very, very dental focused.
Wow, that is so cool. And are you all there in Washington, state of Washington together?
You know what? We really were close together outside around Portland area, and I'm just north of Portland. But in the last couple of years, everybody's kind of gone their different ways. So there's I have a sister that's a dentist in Hawaii, brother in California. As far as Wisconsin, we're kind of more spread out now.
So you're in the state of Washington, and there's a plant behind you. I assume it's medical marijuana growing.
How did you know? How did you know?
How has that gone over in the state of Washington?
Oh my goodness, can I tell you? They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And I guess they're in Oregon now too, because I went back to Oregon last week and I had a high school reunion, and there's a plant in this tiny little town that I grew up of 5,000 people. There's a big pot shop. So I'm going to guess it's legal in Oregon now. Just yesterday, I was taking my kids to the craft store, and this guy's spinning a sign like in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like in this residential area. So I was like, is it a garage sale? What's going on? I turn, it's a cannabis store. And I mean, I will, full disclosure, I have never been in any of them, but obviously they're popping up a lot, so they must be pretty darn popular.
Well, I've been in one because they opened one up across the street from me, and my buddy's a dentist above it. So he's a dentist above a medical. So it says, dentistry, then marijuana, and it's a.
How's that been for his business?
It's actually hilarious. I went in there to see what it was. What I thought was the most amazing thing is it had 10 times more security than the bank. I mean, they had like inch thick glass. I mean, you could have walked in there with an automatic machine gun and not got. And then I was talking to that lady. I said, well, how's sales? Are you busy? And I was talking to her, and there were just stacks of cash. She says no one wants to buy it on their credit card, so it's all cash. And they just come in there, and it's just crazy.
It's
So
crazy. I heard it. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's a franchise up here in Washington, and I heard that it was ridiculous. Like the amount of money that it takes to open, I mean, it's just ridiculous because they're making so much money.
you mean it costs a lot of money to get a license?
You have to get a license. And so, because,
Yeah. But I
yeah,
bet the taxes they're making in an all cash business like that, I bet the
they're doing
huge
well,
portion doesn't even get reported.
I'm sure.
You know. So this is so neat. So this is what spawned your dental consulting career.
I was doing hygiene coaching before when my dad was, when I have two kids. And so when my children were younger, I started doing hygiene coaching because I was fortunate enough to work some in my dad's practice. And I was also really fortunate right out of dental hygiene school to work with some awesome practices who had invested a lot in hygiene. And so I knew a lot about systems. And I think having a different perspective of having a father that's a dentist, I realized that I don't just make, $40 an hour and that's a guarantee, that I really want to be a producer for the practice. I've just had that perspective because my dad would complain about how much hygienists made when I grew up. And so I knew that I wanted to be a benefit to the practice. And so a couple of years out of hygiene school, I met my husband. We moved across the country and I started working for a new practice that didn't have systems in place. They saw what I was doing and I started working for a few different practices across North Carolina and Virginia doing hygiene coaching. Then I had my two kids, started staying at home, and then it was when my dad was diagnosed with leukemia and I saw, for the first time, I thought I knew the stresses that went along with operating a practice. It was not until I was taking on that managerial role that I realized for myself how truly stressful it was. And so I started doing more practice management and leadership coaching after that.
So your website is MarileeSpears.com. So I
That's
assume
right.
your husband was the you don't have to work because he inherited the Sears company, or did how many Sears stores did he inherit?
Zero, unfortunately. He was the unlucky son. Everything went to his brother. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. No relation at all to that Sears family. In fact, you know how you were saying that the accidents always happen with the grandpa, or the dad or the grandpa. His grandpa, the Sears name, passed away when he was, before my husband was born, when his dad was only like 7 or 8 years old. And they really had no contact at all with his dad's side of the family. So he has we both have like no information about the Sears family and where the heritage or any of that. Maybe one of these days we'll figure it out. And if it turns out we're heirs, that would just be a great surprise.
Yeah, it's just amazing how that they just didn't see the vision. I mean, when they closed down their catalog, and that's a good entry. Let me start with that in deal, because what Sears was doing is they didn't realize that all their margin was on the catalog business. And their stores, they had to buy land, buildings, people, healthcare, dental insurance. And then Walmart was afraid of Sears in the big city, so they started crawling around the rural, where the dentists still haven't found the rural area yet. And they started crawling around the rural areas. And by the time they got to about 20, 30 states, they had killed the only profitable part of Sears, and they closed down that catalog business. I believe that was 84 or 94. I think it was 84 or 94. But that's when Jeff Bezos was starting to build up the infrastructure that Sears was sitting on for years, this massive distribution system, all these deals. So Sears lets theirs fade away and close down while Amazon's building theirs up.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
It's just great. Well, and so the point I'm asking in dentistry, so many dentists lose money in hygiene, filling, cleanings, exams, x-rays, and if they don't do 3 $1,000 crowns a day, or a couple molar, they only make a margin, and you can really find where that margin is by looking at the dental specialist income. I mean, when people say they don't like to do extractions or wisdom teeth, it's like, okay, yeah, oral surgeons, they make the most money. And they say, well, I don't like to do endo. Okay, well, those guys make twice as much as you do. What do you want to do? And they don't know the cost of each one of their departments, just like Sears didn't know. It was all peanut butter and jellied in. And then when the cash cow died, and the thing that your dad had to live through the hardest was that Delta of Washington was giving me and your dad $1,000 for a crown 30 years ago. And now that fee's been reduced about 40%. Yeah. So instead of doing $1,000 crown, they're charging $1,000 and adjusting off $400. So now the number one highest overhead is adjusted production. So when your dad and me got out of school, labor was 28%. 30 years later, labor is 28%, but your adjusted production is now number one cost at 42%. But what I want to ask you is, what are you seeing in the field? Who's calling you? What are their problems? What are you solving? If my homies went to MarileeSpears.com, what do you do for them?
Well, that's a great question, Howard. I would say this is that I'm definitely not for everyone, because there is a spirit to my practice. That's all I can say. And so I think most people, well, I would say that the foundation of the practice is hygiene. And that's why, even though I do practice and leadership coaching, I always look at hygiene, because I do believe it's the foundation of the practice. I do believe that there's something deeper in every single practice. And it's the numbers don't
of holding the patients in, or foundation financially?
Well, both. Both, because I think that the standards of care that are set within hygiene set the standard for the rest of the practice. And so, for example, the things that the hygienists are looking for, the things that they're determining as healthy within hygiene, set the standard for both the production of the practice and also keeping those relationships within the practice. So, for example, having that standard of care when it comes to inflammation and infection. If you don't have, most hygienists I talk to think that they have a standard of care. But when it comes down to it, perio is this super gray area. Right? And what one hygienist calls perio is what another hygienist won't call perio. I don't even call it perio, because I think perio is too big of a gray area. So I really talk about inflammation and infection, right? Because we can kind of at least agree there. Is there inflammation? Is there infection present? Because if we start talking about perio, you and I are going to get into a debate about when we diagnose and when we treat. But instead, let's just look at, is there infection? Is there inflammation there? And so I think all of those standards of whether we diagnose and recommend a crown to a patient, whether we recommend fluoride to a patient, whether we recommend an occlusal guard, I believe that those standards get carried out and communicated and carried out, let me put it that way, in hygiene. But I do believe that there's something under the surface, right? And that's why I say I think it's deeper than numbers, or that it's more than numbers, is that there has to just be a spirit to the practice of knowing what you're there for and what you're providing for the patients. And a lot of times, I mean, granted, as you said, the biggest expense is adjusted production. But I think a lot of dentists just don't value dentistry enough to tell patients what they need. And it's same for hygienists too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been saying this a lot lately, that, the average price of a new car is $33,000. What percent of Americans in their lifetime will buy an average new car for $33,000? What percent would you say?
I would say 80.
80%? What percent of dentists never sold a $33,000 treatment plan one time in their entire life?
90%.
What percent?
I would guess 90%.
Yeah, 90, exactly. So 90% of your patients have bought a $33,000 brand new Pontiac, and you're afraid to tell them that they have something more than a broken tooth.
Exactly.
And in every single dentist that tells me that it's never the man in the mirror. It's always Obama and Clinton and Hillary and Putin and the Federal Reserve, and it's never them. And I'll say, okay, dude, you're in a medical dental building with 8 dentists, and that guy at the end of the hall, he does 3 cases a month over 20 grand. Mm-hmm. So everything you just said is completely, and that's what I love about the Care Credit report, because the Care Credit will come in and show you how much everybody in your zip code or county or city or state, how it's all electronic, and they'll sit there and say, well, the economy's bad, the factory closed down, and everybody's committing suicide, and then everyone's dying, and it's like, really? Well, you only do 3 Care Credits a month for $300, and the guy on your same block does 15 a week that are over 1,000. So
yes.
So giving them data. But do you go into the office? Are you in a regional? Do you fly to different states? Or you do it all online? What do you do?
The majority of the work that I do is distance. And so this is what I say to new clients that come on, is that for the first 90 days, we're just going to set the goals and see if we meet the goals. And if we meet the goals, then they can add on. They can always choose to add on an on-site visit. But otherwise, it's just optional. And I would say 80% of my clients, we hit those goals within the first 90 days. And so if they would like to add on the on-site day, it's totally fine. If they don't meet their goals, then I'm happy to go on-site and we figure out really, again, what the deeper things are.
80% of your clients is online.
Totally online, completely online.
And I can't, like, I'm talking to you now, I feel like we're at lunch and you're sitting across the table at Subway, and I never saw that coming when I was in dental school. So there's, you really don't need to go. Why can't you just, and that's why I hate the Android technology, because it's so much nicer to talk to all your friends who have an iPhone, because then you can FaceTime them.
Exactly. It's such a pain. You're right. When our friends don't have FaceTime. My husband has an Android and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I just love FaceTiming my homies. I don't want to text them or call them a sound. Why would you just want sound? I still think that's very interesting how movies were silent for 40 years while they had phonographs. And it took 40 years for one monkey to combine the two. I mean, isn't that just bizarre?
That's insane. I've never watched a silent movie. I don't think I would have the patience for it.
So everybody that thinks that everything they see right now is the best way possible. I mean, there's no historical evidence of that. When you look at the Fortune 500 in 1950, by 2015, 88% of those companies are going to be gone, and your last name, Sears, is on life support.
Oh, for certain, for certain. I mean, I was reading just the other day. I mean, even Gap, Old Navy, there's so many companies that I think were, at least growing up, I thought of such solid, secure companies, completely on life support right now.
And you drive around any city I lecture to, the number one store you see in every retail place, in every center, is space available. I don't know what they sell, but it seems empty. And these dentists, these millennials getting out, they should be able to get some of the best retail location for the lowest price. I mean, I don't even know if it would make sense to own your own building with the way the retail values are plummeting, because every time Amazon's doing another $1 billion a month, more retails are closing down because they're not buying retail.
Well, I'll just share this experience personally that my dad owned his practice, and no doubt about it, Howard, when I was driving around, and at this point we had transitioned the practice itself to the new dentist and to the orthodontist. But driving around the town that I grew up in, 60 to 70% of the retail areas were completely open. They were vacant. I was like, good. My thought was, good luck selling this. And we still had a mortgage on the property, and we were able to sell it. But it's almost shocking to me because 60%, if not more, of the retail space is vacant in that town.
Yeah, and when the stock market crashes, no one wants to buy. And then after it's been in a bull market for years and years and years, and everybody piles in at the top. And right now, real estate is just plummeting, so no one wants to touch it. And this is the time these young millennials could go in there and get a rocking
great deal.
If you're going to sit there for 40 years, and now
absolutely,
there's so much commercial real estate that's selling below its replacement construction cost.
Yeah,
so you couldn't even tear it down and build it for that fee.
That's insane. And I wanted to ask you about this because you mentioned this when we spoke before, and I always love this take on location. You said so many dentists want to be inside of a city, right? And then they commute 30 minutes, they buy a home or rent a home 30 minutes away. And you said if they really looked at it just the opposite, right? If they looked at the rural, and then maybe they even wanted to live in, say, San Diego, but then they drive out 30 minutes, drive east, and then they're going to have an area where they don't have as much competition. But one of the things that I think a lot of dentists still, I think millennials, I think those that are graduating are becoming aware of the competition and the population per dentist, the per capita. But that was something that I don't think has been looked at before.
And what's bizarre is they go, no, I don't want to go into rural. I'm like, dude, your mom and dad came from India. They went to a different country, and you can't go an hour into the hills? Really?
Yeah.
Why did your parents come from the Eastern Hemisphere? For opportunity. I think you need to leave San Diego, and it's just an hour. You're not going to have to get on an airplane, a boat, a ship. You don't have to go through Ellis Island. It's just an hour away. You can get back home. But
I'm going to tell you this, Howard. I know that I used to live in San Diego. We lived there just for like 6 months because it's beautiful. And I mean, San Diego really is wonderful. And I spoke with 3 different dentists who credited you and said, I wish I would have listened to Howard. I wish I would have listened to Dr. Farran, because they did practices right in San Diego or right around San Diego. And just like you said, they live 45 minutes out of the town, and they're faced with so much competition. Yeah, so, take your advice.
So I think everything should pass the 4-finger muster, faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost. I imagine if you're doing online consulting, you're probably faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost. What is your fee for your clients?
My fee is $1,500 a month for most of my clients, and we have tracking that we put in place. So there's some kind of communication each day that they're working, and then generally it's 2 calls a month, one with a dentist and then one with a team. And then there's more support in place if they need it, and a lot of them it's just that's the standard.
And is it a contract?
Yeah, you know what? I used to do a contract and now I'm kind of leaning away from it, to be honest with you. And so it's a little bit on a case by case basis right now. Some of my clients are in contract and some of them we just decide to hit the ground running and we don't even put a contract in place. But
Yeah.
I would say that the majority of them still are under a contract right now.
You never do a contract if it involves a marriage license. And then in consulting, it's always like, well, I just wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to be contractually consulting someone who didn't want my service anymore. I mean,
Absolutely.
I just feel that would be an awkward phone call. It's like, okay, I really,
Not happy.
But let's go more into the logistics. So
Yes.
then you are dialing into their practice management system and doing a diagnosis under the hood on practice management?
Well, there's just certain things that I have the team report back to me. Sometimes it means that I sign into their system. Other times that they just give me reports and send it over to me. So it's different for each practice and each client how they like to manage it. So it also depends just on how they have it set up. If it's like in an open network where I can more or less be brought in, or if it's something where they need to kind of run some reports and send them over to me. So it's different. It's on a case by case basis, I have to say.
So if I notice associates when they're thinking about buying their practice management software, they almost never want to use the one there in their office. They think the grass is greener on the other hill. They say, "Oh, I'm not going to use this one because I hated that one," and they think the next one's going to be better, and they're all equally horrible. Which one? But you work with how many different systems have you worked with?
Oh my goodness, how many systems are out there? I've probably worked with like 12. There's some that I'll work with the new client,
but
they'll tell me something. I'm like, I've never heard of that one before, but so I have a few that are my favorite.
Who are your favorites?
I really like Open Dental, and I think Dentrix. I mean, those two are just kind of the gold standards.
Yeah, I'm telling you, on Dental Town, Open Dental has
Open Dental's
all the
fantastic. It's fantastic.
And I also noticed this, a lot of the people that tell me they like Dentrix or EagleSoft, just ask them like 3 generic questions, they can't answer them. You know, it's like how many dentists tell me, I say, well, if you had 100 patients, they each just had an MO cavity on number 3, and you told 100 patients, individuals, you have an MO cavity on number 3, what % convert and get it done? And they go, oh, 95%. I'm like, okay, well, that's never happened one time in the universe. Now I know a lot about your data, understanding your practice. I mean, a 65% close rate would be a AAA plus, and you should be on the lecture circuit. A 95% means you don't know your butt from second base. So are you, and we switched to Open Dental. We were on SoftDent for 30 years. And by the way, I have no plugs or connection to these companies. By the way, Open Dental is so damn good. They're the only one that doesn't advertise.
Yeah, they are. They're phenomenal. They are phenomenal. You should watch
the podcast I released on the Nathan Sparks, the CEO of podcasts. His brother Jordan's the dentist who started it, but then his brother he gave it to his brother, and it's just they have growth problems. They don't even want marketing. He was like telling me like, well, if I do this podcast, I'm not going to get like a bunch of new business, am I? Because I don't really want that, and. So do you prefer to them run reports, or do you prefer that they give you access and you dial in?
Well, let's be honest. I prefer that I have access and dial in because then I get to choose when I get the information, right? Versus hounding someone and asking for information. So that would be my preference. And that's why I like Open Dental so much, is it's really easy to access and it's easy to share. But it both ways work. In fact, I would say the majority
give you access and what % don't give you access.
I was just going to say that the majority of my clients don't give me access. The majority of them, I would say probably 70% run reports and give me reports.
But don't you think that's the issue of why they need a consultant? They're not open. They're not.
They're not open. They're not sharing. Well, partially, but I mean, I actually can't say that I see a connection between the two right now because I have some people that they still run the reports, and truthfully, their production doubles within 90 days, and they run the reports the entire time. I think a lot of times it's just that awareness of the numbers, and so if they're being aware enough, they generally are going to see some changes. And I'll say it again, I always think that there's more than just the numbers. The numbers kind of lead us to what's going on, but it's systemic. There's something, a culture or a belief, or maybe I would just say a spirit within the practice that causes those numbers to be there. The numbers just kind of are the symptoms of what's going on within the practice. The belief,
I know. I mean, I've said it a million times. When you walk into a dental office, within 10 seconds, you can smell and feel they're crushing it or something's dead.
Totally. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And so one of the things that I want to touch on is that I think a lot of dentists make the mistake of really not knowing who their ideal clients are. I think a lot of dentists say, oh, well, I just want more cash patients. I want more fee-for-service patients. But I think it's a really important thing that dentists look. One of the most important things to be tracking is who are your best patients within the practice? Who are your most productive patients? And realizing that you want to market more to those and really, again, build up those relationships. Make that your gold standard of those kinds of patients. And that's one of the things that probably is the most surprising when I first come in and I'm meeting with dentists, that they might think that their best patients, they end up not really being the best patients at all, right? They can say, oh, well, to give you an example, I was working with a dentist outside of Seattle, and he was saying, well, we have a few people that are Amazon and Microsoft executives, and we want more of them because, money's just no issue for them. And so we went through and we actually did a report looking at the most productive patients. And granted, one of the executives was on there, but 80% of the production was coming from families, and none of those people were executives within the practice. And so the whole point that he'd been building his practice on up until that point had been, I want to have the best technology. I want to be showing this off to people so that we are the most advanced practice in the area. And while it was, I would say that was a good message, the better message for him was about being family friendly. We talked about offering childcare within the practice because he was in a neighborhood and he had a ton of families, and he actually thought families were the problem. He was like, I'm attracting the wrong people, but families were his most productive patients. And so the only way to know that is to look at the numbers, and then he changed it and he has been killing it because now he realizes that he wants to be marketing towards the families. Those are his most productive patients. And sure, if he gets some executives, awesome. But he was totally off base on who he's messaging and who he wanted to attract to the practice.
Yeah, and that's why I went to the junkyard and bought that little merry-go-round and put it in the front of my office. So when they drive by, they see the dental office and they see a little merry-go-round. Then I had a jimmy rig, so you didn't have to put a quarter in there. And sometimes I'll be driving by my office late at night, and there's still kids just writing it and I just last week walked out of a steakhouse because I walked in there and I had 2 grandchildren with me, and my friend had a couple grandchildren, and I saw the way she looked at those kids like oh my God, and I just thought, you know what, this is they probably don't even want us. So we turned around and walked out. Then the manager came running out. I was like, is something wrong? Something wrong? And we just said, we got grandkids. We're just going to go someplace. And I personally think all the best restaurants in the world have pictures of their food on the menu, whether it's Waffle House, IHOP. But yeah, so family friendly, are they're more patient. So what % of your clients take PPOs?
No, that's a really good question. Probably 50-50. I think it's becoming more common. More of my clients are taking PPOs. But when I started a few years ago, it was probably more like 60% of them were fee-for-service. I'm surprised at how many fee-for-service clients I still have, because I know that that's not.
And what is your definition of a fee-for-service practice?
They don't, while they will bill insurance, they don't do write-offs, and they expect to collect their full fee.
But Delta tells on their website that 95% of dentists in America take Delta, and that's to me. They're setting the fee. They're not paying a percentage of the fee. So technically, legally, wouldn't it be 95% of the dentists take? Well, what would you call that? Every dentist that takes Delta takes.
So I guess maybe I should say this. I definitely have clients that don't. They don't deduct for Delta. They're not participating within Delta. So you can say that. I know that's really rare. It's just the clients that I've attracted. So
okay,
I know
well,
that's real.
I only see.
They're not in network with Delta.
I only see those dentists doing that in the rural. I don't ever see. I hardly anyone in the big cities do that. Occasionally, there's some boutique guy crushed in cosmetics or implants or whatever. But as far as the big median pie, do you see them more in rural than urban?
I have 2 that are definitely, like you said, the boutique practices, 150, 137 5-star Google reviews, tons of cosmetic cases that they're able to promote. Those ones, they're within cities, but like you said, otherwise, yes, it is more. They're still in towns. It's not like they're completely in the sticks, but they're just not in like cosmopolitan or metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what 80% of your clients you do online? I think that's. Do you know anyone else who does that?
I don't. I guess I haven't ever asked.
Yeah, I don't know anybody. That I think that is just amazing. And you think 70% don't let you wire in because that's more a technical deal or a embarrassment control issue deal?
Well, I don't think it's an embarrassment control issue. I think it might be a control issue. I definitely think it might be a control issue, but I think that for them, it's one of those things that it's more of a hassle for them to set up a network if they don't already have a network set up. Or some of them, truthfully, especially more in the rural area, they may not even. I mean, I have one client who's paper charts still. I mean, their computer system. Every time I ask them to run a report, they're always like, "We don't know how to do that." And so I am able to put some trackers in place so that they don't have to run the reports. It's just something that I can get the information from them on a daily basis of them entering some information for me that takes them 3 minutes potentially. But I think it might be a control issue, and I think it also might be a convenience issue. And if they see the fact that they're able to get the results they want to get without giving me access to their information, they just might feel more comfortable with that. And I'm okay with that as long as they're getting the results.
So online, you say you've said it several times already that it's beyond the numbers. There's something spiritually dead inside. You can feel it, you can smell it. How do you fix that?
Well, I think we have to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to go into this. Forgive me for just a minute, but while I learned a ton in transitioning my dad's practice, a ton. I think the biggest thing that I learned had nothing to do with reports. It had nothing to do with numbers. It had nothing to do with scripts. It had to do with confidence. It had to do with beliefs. And one of the biggest beliefs that I had changed when I was going through all of this was the fact that I guess I'm tougher than I realized. I can do harder things than I realized. It was absolutely, no doubt about it, the hardest thing I ever had to do. I've gone through a divorce before. I've given birth to 2 children. Transitioning my father's dental practice was the hardest thing that I have ever had to do. And about a year after my dad passed away, Howard, this might sound a little crazy, but forgive me. I was talking to my dad one evening. I could just feel his spirit. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and I could just feel his spirit in the house. I woke up and it just was a different feeling. Like I felt extremely, extremely happy, wide awake at 2:00 in the morning. So I came downstairs and I started talking with him. And I just closed my eyes and said, I know you're here, so I'm just going to close my eyes and talk to you as though you were here. And I was talking to him and I said, I hope you're not offended, but I really like the relationship that we have now better than the relationship we had when you were really here. And it was kind of the silence for a minute, and he just goes, do you want to know why? And I said, yeah, I want to know why. And I mean, it's not like an auditory thing, but we were having this conversation. And I said, yeah, I want to know why. And it was like, here, I have a book. It was like this. It was like so fast, but all these memories went through my mind. And some of them, very few of them I actually remembered. They were when I was 4 years old or 8 years old, of these memories I could remember. But they were all memories that I had of feeling very unwanted, just feeling like I was a burden. And sorry, I will try not to cry, but feeling very unwanted within my family, and especially by my dad. And then my dad said, Marilee, I didn't want you, but it had nothing to do with you. And it was the most healing message that I had, and it changed my life completely, because I realized I was always coming from this place of feeling like a burden or not feeling enough. And I see that actually a lot within dentistry. It has nothing to do with the crowns. It has nothing to do with a lot of things, but it has to do with our belief of what the value that we bring to this world and the value that we bring to our patients' lives. And that's something that I am constantly reassessing for myself, and I'm reassessing for my clients on a regular basis, because it makes all the difference. And it makes all the difference in the value that you get from your practice, regardless of what the numbers are. Sure, the production is awesome, but you feel unworthy if there's something about you that doesn't feel like you're giving back and doing the best for your patients. And so I really believe that's the core of everything.
That is a beautiful story. And I saw that too in growing up in Wichita. It was 25% Catholic. And yeah. I mean, I had my friend Brian Hesse was one of 21 kids. I grew up with 7 kids. I mean, I think when we were in grammar school, his older brother was like 40. I mean, it was crazy. But they used to openly say children should be seen, not heard. I mean, they used to, especially the priest from Poland would say it. They'd say, you'd be talking and you'd stand by to listen, and they'd look at you like, why are you standing there listening? Go play. Or
yep.
You go to someone's house and the mom is always just trying to shoo everybody. Why don't you guys go to the park? Go outside. Children should be seen, not heard. Now the millennial who's having them a decade later, and instead of dropping 4 or 5, they're having 1 or 2.
Yeah,
I think it's truly that children of big, huge families had lots of people feeling that way.
Yeah, and I mean with my
kids,
siblings.
How do you spend time with 8 kids or 10
true.
or 11? How do you do that?
It's true, right? right? I do. I have a different relationship. And let me just say this. I am super grateful for my parents. I can't even imagine having 10 kids. I can't imagine having 11 kids. I can't. I feel like a failure enough having 2 children, and I love them to death, but I feel like a failure I feel like a failure frequently as a parent with 2. And so I'm extremely grateful, but at the same time, like you said, I hope to have a different relationship with my children than I had with my parents growing up. And that's a benefit that I have from just from the way that I was raised. And we all have that perspective of things that we hope to do better.
No, I mean, how many kids went to college and they only saw their parents or talked to their parents when they went home on the breaks or whatever.
Yeah.
And now you have a FaceTime and you can FaceTime your kids. And you always know when they're up to trouble because they'll text me and I'll FaceTime them back and they'll accept. But when they FaceTime them and they deny and then they text me back, I'm like, okay, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. I wonder why I can't see what you are and where you're at and what you're doing. So how do you fix that, though? How do you do that online? How do you find that soul, that purpose? How do you bring it alive?
You're getting deep into it. This is like I said, this is the part where part of me I'm going to say is I feel like my dad just brings the right people to me. He's a part of what I do till this day. And so I think the right people, I definitely have a certain, if it's all about numbers and it's all about systems, I can help there, but the impact is going to not be nearly as much as if we can go into the beliefs and really looking at the routines and the mindset that create who you are and what your practice becomes, what you are able to achieve. And so a lot of it is that we just go into beliefs. Like there's a lot of beliefs, these things that we have in our head that we are not even aware of. And then I think a lot of it is actually like within their body. I've had conversations with dentists when I start talking to them, and I can't explain it, but if it's like I'm the right person for them, they share things that they would never share with anyone else. And I feel so incredibly grateful for that. Like they'll share that they were molested when they were 5 and that we realize that that's still impacting them somehow. And so all I can say is I can't explain it. My dad was able to release me from the burden that I was carrying that I didn't even realize that I was carrying. And I think he still just is able to help me or possibly maybe even work through me to release burdens that other people carry. So I wish I could explain it better, but maybe I'm just a safe space because I've been there myself. And when they realize that they're not alone, there's some comfort that comes from that.
That's a beautiful story. And I've always said for 30 years, the best dental consultants in the world are always an armchair consultant. I mean, psychiatrists or shrink.
Yeah.
And, they're not failing because they're in Tanzania instead of the United States. I mean, when you're in Somalia, you have some macroeconomic issues. Syria, can you imagine being a dentist in Syria? I mean, how are you going to build up your practice with Yelp reviews in Syria?
Exactly. I was going to say I had a dentist reaching out to me from Yemen and asking me questions. And it's just one of those things, like you said, talk about a different set of problems, right?
Yeah. And that it's so sad to see what's happening to Yemen. We got dentists on Dental Town, and some of them have shared so much and so many pictures of what's going on in Yemen, and it's very hard to concentrate on learning better endo skills when every night you're just hearing things blowing up and you're waking up to rubble. I mean, crazy. But yeah. So but when they call you, when they reach out, what are there more common issues? Are they younger versus older?
I would say for my clients, they're either, 10 years within the 10 years of starting their practice or within 10 years of wanting to be out of their practice. That's probably true of 80% of my clients. I do have a few that are in their 40s that they have no desire to retire, but the vast majority of my clients are 10 years in or 10 years out. And I think that they either relate.
The first 10 years or their last 10 years.
Exactly. And so this is my belief. This is my belief, and who knows if I'm completely right. My belief is that they either relate to my dad in that story. In my experience, they relate to my dad and they say, I don't want to, hold on one second. Sorry, something just popped up on my computer. I think that they either relate to my dad and they say, okay, well, I'm still here and I don't want to leave my family with that burden, or I don't want to leave my wife without the production of the practice or the monies from the practice, or that they want to actually enjoy some retirement. My dad never had a retirement. He retired, I guess, 2 months before he passed away and was going through chemotherapy that entire time. So I think they either relate to my dad or they relate to me. that they realize that they are capable of achieving more. And maybe they've already gone through dental school. They've already been successful, but they realize that there's something holding them back, and it's something more than systems. It's something beyond just numbers, because they have open dental or they have these different reports, and yet they can't get their team to be on board, or they can't increase their treatment acceptance. And so they realize that there's something more than just systems and scripts that's the solution.
So you're kind of almost like a dental psychologist.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit like a dental therapist.
Yeah, the true definition of a dental therapist. That is a good one. That is very interesting. And what is what's different about those guys preparing the last 10 years versus the first 10-year people calling you?
Well, I would say I always think it's easier. The earlier, the better. And so I have to say, personally, I like working with those that are newer into practice, because it's just easier to change the systems and change the culture when there's been 2 years into the practice than when there's been 47 years into the practice. And yeah, there's really some dentists that have worked that long, or 35 years into the practice. But having said that, as far as the results, the dentists that have been working over 30 years and see a complete change in the way that they are relating to patients and a complete change in their practice, there's a different relationship that I get when they see the results, because I think it's harder for both of us, but they're like, here I am 35 years into practice, and I finally get the value of what I'm offering. Or I finally get that I'm really, really good. I finally am feeling confident about my skills, whatever it may be, because again, it was never about the skills. It was never about the CE. That was kind of the excuse before. The truth is, they didn't really value themselves. There were some worth issues going on. And I think that's it. I know it's probably not the case in every practice. In the clients that I work with, self-worth and confidence is very frequently a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and it's so sad because how a society raises that kid the first 5 years is going to have more to do with that kid's future. And then these kids go to school, they focus on algebra and geometry and trig, and they don't even know how to take care of themselves. They don't even know how their mind works. They don't even, they don't love themselves.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm the really annoying person. My kids, I have a husband and 2 children, both boys, and they get annoyed with me. Like, for example, yesterday we went to the park, and there was this little boy that just comes up and starts talking to me. And I don't know. I'll talk to anybody, but this little 5-year-old kid is talking to me, and he's talking, and my boys were like, Mom. I could tell they were getting annoyed because I'm talking to this 5-year-old. But then through the course of the conversation, he tells me that he hasn't seen his mom in years, and his dad is in prison. And I'm like, I am so glad I didn't just brush him off. I'm so glad that I didn't say, like, okay, I'm going to go play with my kids now. My kids get me every day, right? But I just have those moments of, like you said, we're lucky enough to get to impact each other's lives, whether you're 5 or 65 years old. And I'm blessed to get to do that. It's my favorite part of what I do, whether it's in the dental office or outside of it.
So are any of those problems when the dentist calls you? And by the way, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
The best way for them to get a hold of me is Marilee at MarileeSpears.com. Like, that's the best email address, or MarileeSpears@gmail. Those are both my private email addresses, and that's the best way for them to contact me.
And Marilee is spelled differently. It's Marilee. So Mary with an I, then Lee.
That's
Marilee.
Right. And then Sears like the store.
And Marilee, Sears like the store. And I thought that was interesting in Freakonomics, where they said there was 274 different spellings of the name Unique just in California. And I always tell people, you should really thank your mom for misspelling that word. And so that you have to correct everybody until you're 103 years old. So the best way for them to contact you is Marilee, Marilee, at MarileeSears.com. Do they usually, the incoming email, are there any other issues or problems? Is it a staff issue? Is it a financial issue?
I guess I'm going to say this. I know a lot of people listen to this. The right people, I've honestly gotten emails of things like this, like, it just felt right. You know what I'm saying? Or like, I went to, I've been on your emails, and there's just something about you that's different. Those are my ideal clients. Because again, I can help with systems. I can help with implementation. I can help with teamwork and all of those things. But my true things are just the people that, like, we somehow get each other. We kind of connect. And so As
So
far as what are
your main thing is trying to get their head on straight.
Absolutely, 100%. That's a great way of putting it. Because for a lot of them, it's not even necessarily about the fact of, again, because of my story, some of them, it's not necessarily that they even want to be producing a lot more, but maybe they want to be taking 5 more weeks off per year because they have young children, or they realize that they should be able to, they have a lot of team turnover, and they're going, okay, I'm tired of this, and I know that now it's the man in the mirror. It's not, it's not because I live in this town and there's no good employees in the area. They start to somehow be willing to take accountability. I think that's when people call me, is because they start to realize, okay, I'm a bigger piece of this than I realized before. And so, like you said, it's all about getting their head on straight.
And it's a very homogenous pot, because it's like natural selection. I mean, you can't enter this profession unless you got an A in calculus, physics, geometry, biology. That's a very specific type of monkey. Most monkeys, if you say, what is your worst subject? What do you hate the most? They go, math.
Yeah.
Well, hell, you couldn't get in dentistry unless you got an A in geometry, trig, algebra, calculus, then apply that to physics, then apply that to chemistry. And so it should not surprise anybody that the 2 million dentists on earth are extremely similar in their mindset.
Yes.
Because they've all been filtered out. I mean,
like you said, they've all been filtered out, and they've been so good. They've been so good until they create their own practice. I guess that's the part that, and then they're just dumbfounded because they've been so good. They've gotten A's. They were the top of their class.
Because the skill set they're good at has no relation to running a dental office.
Exactly, right? Because you can let me even say this. You might even be better at school if you lack confidence, that you need that to help bolster your confidence and bolster your identity. Being really, really good, being top of the class can almost be that double-edged sword, right? And so then they take that into their practice, and they think that's something that's going to help them be successful, that they were top of the class or that they always got A's. But the truth is, if they don't have that core, the ability to connect with someone else and just be human, it limits how successful they can be in practice.
Oh, yeah. And some of that stuff, like I actually, when we got into physics, they started talking about the universe and cosmetology. Is it cosmetology or cosmology? Cosmology. Is it astrology? Astronomy, or whatever. The cosmos. And once in that course, they kind of dabbled on it a little bit, and then they said you could skip some chapters. But I started getting really interested in that, and I started reading, and I realized, okay, dude, you could do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the rest of your life, and not even buy a cup of coffee at Walmart. You're getting too interested in this. You're getting, it's taking way too much of your time. You need to learn skill sets to have a family and start a business.
Okay, I'm going to say this, but you know what? Maybe this is because you have a power to you. You have a power to you, and you know this. That's why you have such a following. So who knows? You might have been the first Wayne Dyer. Is Dyer? Wayne Dyer? Do you know who that is?
Wayne Dyer, yeah.
Yeah, you might have been the first Wayne Dyer, but you're like, there is a power to you. You would have been successful whatever route you chose. I'm glad you chose dentistry.
Well, thank you. But I think where they fail, they either they know what they know, they know what they don't know, but they don't know what they don't know. And everything they got A's in doesn't matter. You're never going to use physics and gravity in running your business. So then after that, they seem to excel whatever they're interested in. I mean, if you're interested in playing the violin every day, then everybody says, "Oh, she's a musical genius. She's the best violinist, and she's only 9." No, she's not a genius. She's interested in the violin, and
she enjoys the violin.
She plays it 1,000 hours a year. But if you dissected her brain and then compared it to all the other brains, you don't see any difference between ant brain, dolphin brain, chimpanzee brain. You all got the same brain, but you only really get good at anything you're interested in. So many of these dentists are so interested. Like they'll say, well, I bought CAD-CAM because I'm really interested in technology. And I'll say, okay, well, that's cool, but your rationale for, that just means you're interested in it. But I'd really like you to be interested in the business too. And these dentists that say in Seattle, they say, well, I want all these Microsoft executives, so I want to have all this latest and greatest technology. You never hear a physician ever say that.
Ever, never.
He didn't say, oh, we upgraded our CAT scan to an MRI, and our ultrasound imaging, we upgraded to the new color ultrasound imaging. Now you can see your little baby worm wiggling in color. I mean, nobody says that. In medicine, veterinary, chiropractor, podiatry, only dentists say that because they want it to be true. Do you do you think any technology with your clients is making or breaking them?
I wouldn't say that unless it's a very competitive market, I wouldn't say technology is something that is a differentiator. Just to give you an example, like I said, I went to my class reunion last week and someone came up to me and was asking what dentist they should go to. And I said, okay, well, let me do, I haven't lived in that town for a while. And I said, let me do some research and I'll get back to you. And I came back to her and I said, does technology matter? And she said, not one bit. And she's making the decision for her 2 children and for her husband. And she's a nurse herself. And I said, do you care if to this extent, I said, do you care if they have digital x-rays? Because I knew of a dentist in the town who didn't have digital x-rays, a really great hometown dentist that has not invested in digital x-rays. She said, I don't care. And I thought that's really telling to me. That, I'll be honest, for myself, that would probably make a difference. I really prefer that for my children and myself that we have digital radiographs. But I thought, here it is a nurse who said, no, it doesn't make any difference at all to me. Technology was not a differentiator for her. So I would say that to be able to stand out as technology, at least that can't be the message. That can't be that you need to stand out being pain-free. You need to stand out as being family-friendly or kid-friendly or the fact that you can sleep through dentistry. But to be able to say we have the best technology, I don't think anybody's out there looking for that.
What factor do you think staff turnover plays on practice success?
I think I used to believe that it was, you want your team to be with you for forever. And granted, that's probably because one of the practices that I worked with early out of hygiene school, they have team members that have been there 15 years, 20 years, and they are a phenomenal practice. But now I've just realized that I think it's really important to have like core team members that are good and that are there forever. But I also think it's also important that you are willing to let team members go that are not a good fit. And I don't think I was as willing to say that early on in coaching people that, okay, if it doesn't matter that Mary's been there 15 years, if she's not on board with the vision of the practice, you can only give her a certain amount of time before you say, sorry, Mary, you're not the right fit for the practice any longer. We're going in a different direction. So I think that I can't give you a really concrete answer there. I think that it's important to have a good core team, but then to also be willing to cut ties for people that don't support you and the vision of the practice.
And they do it in the NFL all day long.
Yeah.
Some guy took him to 4 Super Bowls, then the next year he's fired. And it's like, yep. I don't care what you did 4 years ago and 10 years. But I think the greatest thing in life is the people. I would not have been wanting to be born alone on Hawaii, all by myself. But they're also, that's the worst part of life. So the people are the best part of life and they're the worst part of life. And I think the hardest thing a human has to do is learn to navigate with his wife, his children, his employees, it's all people skills. On those people calling you in the first 10 years, how do you see much issues with people skills, whether it's communicating with staff or patients?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something of you being clear of who you are and what you stand for early on, because otherwise you put up with a lot of crap from patients and from team members that you never should. I think a lot of people, what I see from female dentists is that they're too nice. They want everyone to like them, and so they don't set that structure early on. And I said women, I see it a lot of times with men too, especially if they buy a practice and the team members have been there for 14 years. Oh, well, I don't want to rock the boat. Beth wouldn't go along with that. And just realizing the fact of you have to have a certain level of respect from your team that has nothing to do with the fact it just has to come from the fact that you own the practice and you're doing the payroll. And it doesn't matter that you're 29 and they're 55. There still has to be a certain level of respect. And so I think that a lot of times it's setting that up of how a team needs to treat a practice owner, regardless of if they're younger or if they've just come into the practice. I think that there's something to be said both ways, right? For a new dentist coming in, seeing how patients were treated and seeing the culture of the practice. But then also the team needs to be flexible and be willing to accommodate and follow the new dentist. And if that's not possible, I don't think it's a good fit.
Yeah, that is so cool. I've heard several consultants say over the years that one of the problems with dentists is that they're too nice. I'm like, well, that's freaking cool. I like being in a profession.
I know. Okay,
isn't that so
true? But I think that's one of the things is that there's almost like this hidden aggressiveness to dentists that it's like they don't stand their ground until they're pissed off, right? And so I want them to stand their ground and to set those boundaries and set those I don't know what the word isn't coming to my mind right now, but just those expectations before they're pissed off, right? This is the expectation, and deal with your team members before you're at that breaking point if you're going to need to let them go or you're just going to lose it on them. right? And so I think that that's, and again, just something to understanding, having that confidence that you can stand up for yourself without being pushed too far, before it comes to the point where you've been pushed too far and those relationships can't be repaired, whether it's with a patient or with a spouse or with an employee.
Yeah, I mean, we're hardwired at birth to not be, to get along. We need to work together. Doesn't matter if you're honeybees, ants, termites. We're all programmed as social animals to get along. So having an uncomfortable conversation is not natural. And the more uncomfortable conversations you have, you'll rise to the top. And that dentist will see Mary Ann come in 10 minutes late, and he's like, and then she does like 6 times. He never says anything.
Yes.
And then he goes postal on her, and he fires her. And I tell dentists that if you fire a staff member and they're shocked, you are a horrible manager and a horrible person.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got a mortgage on her house, her car. This came out of nowhere, and you didn't make that decision out of nowhere. It's all about communication.
Yes. And that communication, I think there has to be a certain level of confidence or self-worth in order for that communication to happen and for it to happen, seamlessly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my goodness, I could talk to you forever. And I know that I think that they're even flagging you down.
Did we go over? Back to the conversation. And so many dentists don't get any feedback from their staff because the staff doesn't feel safe. Yes. The lab man is afraid to tell you that he could really help you, but he doesn't want to lose your account.
Yep.
The Patterson rep, when she comes in, is going to bring you donuts and tell you you're wonderful and you're her favorite practice because she told you, you guys are freaking crazy and I know what's going on. I'm only in here 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
It's so obvious, but you don't make anyone feel safe to tell you the bad news. So you shoot the messenger. I mean, that's been a problem for 1,000 years. You shoot the messenger. You don't want to hear bad news. And then you're back there in your office, scratch your head wondering what the hell's wrong. I call the Saddam Hussein syndrome. The reason these dictators make such bad decisions is because they shoot anyone who disagrees with them. And so all the talented people leave. And then as soon as the dictator falls, the place goes crazy. And they always blame it on, well, they need a dictator. No, the dictator shot, killed, and ran off everyone that could have ran this country for the last 20 years. So it's been dumbed down.
Yep.
And so now we're dealing with the bottom of the barrel because all the talent, I mean, every smart person from all those countries, their families moved here 20 years ago.
Yep.
30 years ago, 100 years ago. But you have that website. You're doing a new online event. There's a website.
That's right. I was going to say that's what we're going to be airing.
100newpatients.com/HOWF, HOWF, www.100newpatients.com/HOWF. What's all that about?
Well, what this is about is because every year I do an event, and it's, again, I won't give the whole backstory, but I started doing it right after my dad passed away as a way to collaborate with the top experts within dentistry. And so I did the Future of Dentistry event for the past 3 years, and one of the most popular topics was always about marketing, how everyone wants to attracting more new patients. And so this year, the topic is really going to be focused on 100 new patients. What are the best ways, the fastest ways, the most profitable ways to attract more patients into the practice? And we're covering also a number of things from systems to patient retention to in-office referrals. There's a lot of different topics that are being covered, but that's the main topic we're talking about is what are the best ways to bring more new patients and more ideal patients in through your front door.
I love that. I support it. I'm all for it, and it's all true, and every dentist wants it and needs it. But new patients, just like getting hooked on opioids or heroin.
Totally.
Because if you keep getting 100 new patients a month, you never ever have to stop and think, why are we losing 100 new patients a month? Because I'll go in there and I'll
say,
why
do you need 100 new patients a month? Exactly.
Because 4 out of 5 of their patients never come back, and they think the problem is they don't have enough new patients. Well, if you lose 80% of your patients every 5-year period, that's why you need new patients. I mean, I meet dentists who are the only dentist in a town of 2,000. They've practiced there from age 25 to 65. And I said, what do you need? He's like, I need new patients. Like, buddy, you've pissed everyone off in this county 3 times each. You're 65. After 40 years, you would think the only thing you wouldn't need is marketing. I mean, and there's nobody in this county. He doesn't even know your name. And when you walk in and to the store, they know who you are, and you really think they need a flyer? Yeah. Did you ever stop to think, why does 4 out of 5 people not come back. And there's so many things that can go wrong because, like in a restaurant, if you can get the food consistency, and the killer restaurants had that one thing, whether it's you go there because you like the chips and salsa or you like there's this one thing. If they can do that consistently, you know, you can pretty much crush it. But in dentistry, my God, the whoever answers the front call can run off the patient. Then when they come in, the assistant can drop the patient. They might not like the hygienist. They might like the dentist, and they sure as hell don't like the shots, and the crown didn't feel right, or they didn't like the shape. I mean, there's just so many things that can go wrong in dentistry that they like to take the eye off that and just correct it all with a bunch of new patients.
Absolutely. Is it a Band-Aid approach? 100%. And I'll just share this with you. Is that marketing? I mean, was this a marketing? Of course, because I don't believe that a 100 new patients fixes anything. And and as you said, those dentists who are attracting 50, 60 new patients a month and are continuing to attract that many patients per month, and yet their practices, they're not adding a new associate every year or every 2 years. There's a problem there. Right? And a big piece of it, because dentistry still is a relationship, it's still a human interaction. And as you said, so many things can go wrong. I always say you're only as good as your last appointment. It doesn't matter how good the appointments are. It doesn't matter, you know, how well you treat patients that first appointment. You're only as good as your last appointment or the last patient interaction. Could have even been a phone call, but you're only that good.
So my final question, that's brilliant, because right now, you know, everybody thinks linear. I remember the stock market days from 93 to 2000, they were coming out with books, Dow 40,000. I mean, everyone's a linear thinker, you know, when real estate's going up, but what goes up? But right now, everyone believes, except for me, that, you know, that corporate dentistry has gone from 0 to 12% in the last 10 years, and in the next 10 years, it's going to 25%, and eventually they'll get half. And I'm like, really? Because I don't see any evidence of that at all right now. What is your view of corporate?
Well, my view of corporate is like, I will agree with you. I know way too many private practice dentists who have absolutely no plans to change things. Some of them have purchased their practice 3 years ago. Some of them have purchased their practice 30 years ago, but they're not planning to retire, and they're absolutely not planning on selling their practice to a corporate entity. And so I think as long as there are people within dentistry who want to be in private practice, and those that are saying, no, I'm not planning on selling my practice, of course there's going to be private practice. I guess maybe I am jaded because I have that view, because my dad was in private practice. I have a brother and a sister that are both in private practice. And so if I see dentists who are looking to buy a private practice, then I think it's going to continue to be out there. And so I think it's a little...
But I guess the more specific, what I meant is, you know, you're only as good as your last appointment. Do you think corporate is significantly better with the patient at that last appointment?
No, I don't believe so at all. No, I don't believe. Well, but I will say this: I think that dentists and teams, in general, believe that they think that they're better than they are. Can I just say that? I think a lot of times we think that we're better than we are. And so we can say, oh, well, corporate can't compete with me because because it's a relationship practice. Okay, but what are you doing to exceed your patient's expectations then? Because you can't just hang the hat on the fact of, I own this practice, and so my patients get a different relationship with me. I think you really do have to ask those questions. How do we stand out? How do we go above and beyond our patient's expectations? Because otherwise, really, I want the patients to feel like there's a difference there. It doesn't matter if we think there's a difference there. It matters from the patient's perspective if there's a difference there. Do I think that corporate is better in that way? Absolutely not. I don't think that they're better at forming relationships, but I also think that there's plenty of dentists out there and teams out there that could do better at communicating the value and forming those relationships and treatment acceptance and all those other things that really have very little to do with the actual numbers in the systems.
Well, I want to be an equal opportunity offender. I don't want any of I got some very good friends that own big corporate deals. I mean, I think the world of Rick Workman owns Harlem. So I first want to say there's not one dental office in the world keeping all their patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's not one dental office in the world who doesn't need more new patients after 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So that tells you a couple things. Dentistry is a very hard people-pleasing business. It's a lot easier to please you to perform a mani-pedi or cut your hair on you than it is a root canal. I mean, so let's just be honest. You're in a tough space working in a scared human, and they're scared about the cost and the pain. So it's a very difficult. No one's keeping their associates in private practice or in corporate. Again, these people didn't go to school 8 years to not have skin in the game. I think the lawyers are doing it better because half the lawyers got light at the end of the temple where they said, Marilee, you come in here and you work your butt off for 5 years. and you bring us new business, and you burn the midnight hours. I'm working 9 to 5 because I'm 55, but you're 25.
Yeah, I put those hours in. Yeah,
your 95 is 95 hours a week, and you do that, and one day we might call you in here and make you a partner. They don't see that at the end of the tunnel as an associate. The only associates who are staying are the ones that see at the end they're going to buy the practice, they're going to make partner, they're going to own it. Yes. So it's so complicated, but I just love you to death. I think your story is amazing. I think your family's amazing. I was like your mother. I would have had 11 kids. I mean, I had 4 boys in 60 months. And, but yeah, I just think it's a beautiful story, beautiful family. I hope you crush it on the 100newpatients.com.
Thank you. And Howard, it's such a pleasure. And I just want to say this. You are so genuine, so fantastic. It is always an honor to get to connect with you.
All right. On that note, I hope you have a rocking hot weekend. And kiss those 2 little boys from Uncle Howie for me.
It sounds great.